Hello friends, welcome to the HFY Ode, where we bring you new science fiction stories, a new world, a new adventure. And yes, there is no robotic or AI voices here, only real human voices with real human touch. So let's start this journey, and please subscribe my channel if you like the stories and press the bell icon for the latest updates. Let's have a story. Okay.
You want to know the strangest thing I ever saw? It wasn't a battle. It wasn't a ship the size of a moon falling out of the sky. It was a girl. A skinny human girl who barely came up to my shoulder, standing in the middle of a parade ground while the whole academy held its breath. I'll get to that. Let me start at the beginning because if I just tell you the end, you won't believe me. Nobody does the first time. My name is Corval. I'm Drennick, you'd call us, the tall gray ones if you saw us, though we don't love that. I served 14 cycles as a junior instructor at the Coalition War Academy on Telos Station, and I was there the day they brought the humans in. Let me set the scene for you. Just give me a moment. Telos Station hangs over a dead world. Used to be a planet down there, green once, they say, before the old war burned it black. Now it's just a gray ball with scars on it, and the station floats above it like a vulture that never landed. You'd think a place that ugly would be quiet. It's not. It's the loudest place in the galaxy. The Academy takes the best from 40 species. 40. The Threks with their 4 arms and their tempers. The Maul who breathe a gas that would melt your lungs, so they wear those big bubble helmets everywhere. The Cask, who are basically walking knives, long, fast, and so proud they'd rather die than apologize. And us, the Drennick, somewhere in the middle, tall and patient and a little too fond of rules. The morning the humans arrived, the air recyclers were making that high whine they make when the dust gets in them. There's always dust on Telos. It comes off the dead planet somehow, drifts up through the docking seals, gets in everything. You taste it. Metal and ash. After a few cycles, you stop noticing, but new recruits always notice and they always make a face. The humans made a face too, but here's the thing, they didn't complain. I was on the observation deck when their transport docked. Old ship. Patched in 3 places, one of the patches a different color than the hull, like they'd run out of the right paint and just used whatever was lying around. The other instructors laughed at that. A Cask named Vosh, you'll hear more about him, actually clicked his jaw plates, which is how they laugh, and said the humans had flown in on a piece of scrap. I didn't laugh. I don't know why. Maybe because I noticed the ship had docked perfectly. Dead center on the seal first try, no correction burns. You don't fly a piece of scrap like that unless somebody very good is at the controls. The doors opened. Steam hissed out, their air was warmer than ours, wetter, and they walked down the ramp in a single line. 12 of them. That's all they sent. 12 humans against a class of 300 from 40 worlds. I remember thinking, they won't last the first month. I was wrong about almost everything that cycle, but I was most wrong about that. You have to understand what the galaxy thought of humans back then. Almost nothing. We'd only known your kind for a handful of cycles. You came out of a corner of space nobody watched, a backwater nobody had bothered to map. Word was you'd fought some little war among yourselves, and somebody important had decided you might be useful, so a few of you got invited to the big schools to see what you were made of. The official position was polite. The unofficial position, the one we said in the mess hall with our food in front of us, was this: humans were soft, short-lived, fragile. You break a bone if you fall wrong. You bleed from a scratch. You sleep a third of your lives away. You can't see in the dark, can't smell danger, can't hear a cask move until it's already on you. By every measure that mattered to a soldier, you should have been the worst recruits in the building. The girl I'm going to tell you about, her name was Mara. Mara Okonkwo. I didn't learn the second part for weeks. Humans have these long layered names and we couldn't hold all the pieces at first. She was the smallest of the 12. Dark skin, hair shaved close to the scalp like the others, a scar through one eyebrow that she never explained. She didn't talk much. When the rest of us were sizing each other up, puffing out our chests the way recruits do. She just stood at the back and watched everything. I watched her watch. It was the only thing she seemed to do at first, watch and wait. The cask decided right away that the humans were beneath them, Vosh especially. He was the top of the class, fastest, strongest, meanest, and he knew it. The cask have a thing they do, a kind of honor system, but it's a cruel one. To them, weakness isn't just bad luck. It's an insult. If you're weak, you're taking up space a strong one could use. You're a stain on the order of things, and there is nothing a cask hates more than a stain. So Vosh looked at 12 small, soft humans walking down a ramp from a patched-up ship, and he didn't see recruits. He saw an insult that had flown in on purpose, just to offend him. I think that's where it started, right there, before any of them had said a single word. The first weeks were what the first weeks always are. Brutal. The academy doesn't ease you in. The idea is to break you down to nothing and then build you back into something the coalition can use, and the breaking down part is the part they're good at. You run until you're sick. You climb until your hands bleed, or whatever your species does instead of bleeding. You go without sleep, without food, without comfort, and the instructors stand over you and tell you that you're nothing, that you'll always be nothing, and they watch to see who breaks. The humans didn't break. Now I won't lie to you and say they were the best at everything. They weren't. The Threx outlifted them. The cask outran them. The Maul could go without breathing for stretches that would have killed a human in seconds. In any single contest of raw ability, a human usually came in somewhere near the bottom. But they didn't break. That was the thing none of us could explain. I remember the endurance march. 40 hours, full pack, no rest, through the simulated terrain on the lower decks. They crank the gravity up, drop the temperature, fill the air with that ash smell. By hour 30, recruits were dropping. A Threx, a thing the size of a small vehicle, just sat down and wept and couldn't get up. 2 cask quit. Cask, the proud ones. They'd rather have died, except quitting let them live, and when it came down to it, they chose to live. The humans finished. All 12. The last one across the line was Mara, and she was a mess, limping, one boot torn, dragging her pack because she couldn't lift it anymore. But she crossed. And here's what got me. She crossed, and then she turned around and went back, and she half-carried a Maul recruit the last 100 meters, a recruit from a species that thought humans were vermin, who would have spat on her if it could have spared the moisture. She didn't have to, there were no points for it, nobody asked. I was standing at the finish line marking times. She set the Maul down, made sure it was breathing right through its helmet, and then she just sat in the ash and breathed. Didn't say anything. Didn't look for praise. Just sat there in that gray dust like she'd done the most ordinary thing in the world. I wrote down her time. My hand was a little unsteady. I told myself it was the cold. Vosh hated them more with every cycle that passed. You'd think the opposite, wouldn't you? You'd think watching them endure would earn some grudging respect. With most species it would have. But Vosh wasn't most species, and the cask mind doesn't work like ours. To him, the humans surviving wasn't proof of strength. It was proof that the universe was broken. These soft little things were supposed to fail. They were supposed to confirm the order of the world, the order that put cask at the top and humans somewhere down near the dirt. And instead they kept refusing to die. And every time they refused, it was like a crack running up the wall of everything Vosh believed. He started small. A shove in the corridor that he'd call an accident. Rations that went missing from human lockers. Equipment that turned up broken right before a human needed it. The instructors saw and didn't see. The academy has a long tradition of looking the other way while recruits sort out their own pecking order. It's supposed to make you tougher. Mostly, it just makes the cruel ones crueler and teaches the rest to keep their heads down. The humans kept their heads down. They didn't report him. I think they knew it wouldn't help. But they didn't grovel either, and that drove Vosh past reason. He wanted them to crawl. He wanted to see fear in those small, flat human faces, and he never got it, and the not getting it ate him alive. Myra was the one he fixed on. I never fully understood why her. Maybe because she was the smallest and a predator goes for the smallest. Maybe because she was the one who never looked away from him. The other humans would lower their eyes when Vosh passed, not from fear, I think, but from a kind of strategy, a refusal to give him the fight he wanted. Mara didn't lower her eyes. She'd meet his stare, hold it for exactly as long as he held hers, and then go back to whatever she was doing like he wasn't worth a second thought. That look, I can still see it. It wasn't a challenge exactly. It was worse than a challenge for a cask. It was indifference. She looked at the deadliest recruit in the academy the way you'd look at weather, something that happens, something you wait out. It was going to come to a head. Everyone could feel it. The whole class could feel it, the way you feel a pressure change before the seals blow. The instructors felt it too. We just told ourselves it would sort itself out, the way these things always did. We were fools. I should tell you about the day in the sparring hall, because that was the first time the whole class understood that something was different about her. Not stronger, different. Combat training at the academy is mixed species, which is its own kind of cruelty because not everyone's built the same. They pair you off and you fight, and the instructors watch and grade. Usually they're careful to match you by some rough measure, mass, reach, that sort of thing. But the matching is done by a duty officer, and that cycle the duty officer was a cask friend of Vosh's, and he matched Mara against Vosh himself. It was murder dressed up as training. Everyone knew it. Vosh outweighed her 3 times over. He was faster. He had natural blades on his forearms that the rules said had to be sheathed, but everyone knew accidents happened, and he had been waiting cycles for exactly this. I almost stopped it. I want you to know that. I took a step toward the duty officer to call it off. And another instructor, an old Drennick named Sethen who'd been at the academy longer than I'd been alive, put a hand on my arm and said, very quietly, "Watch first." I didn't understand. I do now. The match started. Vosh came at her like a storm, all speed and blades and noise, and Mara, she didn't meet it. That was the first surprising thing. Every other recruit met Vosh head-on because that's what you're trained to do, stand and trade, and every other recruit got taken apart for it. Mara didn't stand. She moved. She gave ground. She let him come, let him swing, let him commit, and she just wasn't where the blow landed. The hall went quiet. You could hear the recyclers whining. Vosh got angrier, which made him faster, which made him sloppier. He started overcommitting, reaching too far, and every time he did, Mara was already sliding past it. She didn't hit him much. A tap here, a redirect there. She wasn't trying to win on points. She was doing something else. She was studying him, wearing him down, letting his own fury exhaust him while she barely broke a sweat. I'd never seen anything like it. The cask fight to overwhelm. The Threx fight to crush. We Drennick fight by the book. But this was patience as a weapon. This was a small thing surviving a large thing, not by being stronger but by refusing, again and again, to be where the large thing wanted her to be. It went on for a long time, too long for Vosh's pride. And finally, humiliated, exhausted, half-blind with rage, he did the thing the rules forbid. He unsheathed a blade. Mid-swing, low, aimed at her midsection, a strike that would have opened her up and ended more than the match. The whole hall saw it. I started forward again. I didn't need to. Mara saw it coming. I don't know how. She shouldn't have been able to. A cask blade moves faster than a human eye can track, but she saw it, or felt it, or guessed it, and she wasn't there. She turned inside the strike, caught his arm, used his own momentum, and put him on the floor. Hard. Flat on his back, the wind knocked out of him, his own blade pointed at his own throat where she held it, perfectly still, not pressing. She could have killed him. Everyone in that hall knew she could have killed him. It would even have been justified. He'd drawn a blade. He'd broken the rule that exists to keep recruits from murdering each other. She didn't. She held the blade exactly where it was, an inch from his throat, and she looked down at him with that same weather-watching calm, and then she leaned in and said something to him. Quiet, just for him. Nobody else heard it. And then she stood up, sheathed his blade, set it down beside him on the floor, and walked back to her starting mark like nothing had happened, like she was waiting for the match to be formally ended. Vosh lay there a long moment. When he got up, his face, well, cask faces don't move much, but his did something I'd never seen. It wasn't anger. The anger was gone, burned out. It was something closer to fear, not fear of dying. He'd faced death 100 times in training and never blinked. It was a different fear, deeper, the kind that comes when the ground you've stood on your whole life turns out to be hollow. He'd been beaten by a human, in front of everyone. And worse, she'd let him live, and the letting him live was somehow more devastating than any death. Because in the cask mind, you only spare what you don't fear. You only spare what's beneath you. She'd looked down at the proudest creature in the academy, and decided he wasn't worth killing. He never got over it. That's important for later. Hold on to that. After the sparring hall, the other recruits started looking at the humans differently. Not warmly, not yet. But the contempt cracked. You could see it crack. The Threx, who respect strength above all, started nodding to the humans in the corridors, a small thing, but the Threx don't nod to anyone they don't respect. Amal traded a human its dessert ration, which doesn't sound like much until you know that Mal consider food a private, almost sacred thing, and would no more share it than share their own blood. And the instructors started arguing about them in the staff lounge. I was there for a lot of those arguments. Sethan, the old one, was the first to say it out loud, that we'd misjudged the humans badly, that there was something in them we didn't have a name for, and that we'd better find a name for it fast because the coalition was watching how this experiment went. They don't quit, Sethan said. He was old, his skin gone almost white the way Drennick's skin does near the end, and he'd seen more recruits come and go than anyone. Every other species, there's a point you can push them to where they stop, where the body says no or the mind says no. I've found that point in every species I've ever trained. I can't find it in them. I keep pushing and they keep going, and I don't understand where it comes from. It comes from being too stupid to know when to stop, Vosh's old instructor said. He was a cask too, of course, and he was offended on his students' behalf, and he wanted the humans to be stupid because the alternative was unbearable. No, Sethan said. I thought that at first. It's not stupidity. They know exactly how bad it is. That's the strange part. The Threx pushes through because he doesn't feel it as much. The Maul pushes through because it can shut off the part that feels. But the humans, they feel all of it, every bit. They're in agony and they know they're in agony, and they keep going anyway because they decided to. It's a choice. Every step is a choice they make again. I've never seen anything choose so hard. The room went quiet after that. Even the cask didn't have an answer. I think that was the first time any of us came close to understanding. But we still didn't have the words. The words came later. The words came from Mara herself on the worst day of that cycle, and when they came, they were so simple that I felt like a fool for not having found them on my own. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you about the cold cycle, because you needed to understand everything that came after. Every training cycle at the academy ends with what they call the proving. It's a survival trial. They drop the whole class onto the dead planet below, the burned gray world, into a quadrant they've prepped to be just barely survivable, and they leave you there. Days, sometimes weeks. No resupply. The terrain tries to kill you. The temperature tries to kill you. And quietly, so do the instructors, because they seed the quadrant with hazards and watch through drones to see who has what it takes. You're supposed to work in your assigned squads. The point is partly survival and partly teamwork. They want to see if 40 species can stop hatting each other long enough to stay alive. Mostly they can't. Every cycle, squads fracture. The strong abandon the weak. The proud refuse to follow orders from species they consider beneath them. People die. The Academy considers this acceptable. It's a war school. The galaxy is a hard place, and they're not in the business of raising you gentle. That cycle, the squads were assigned by the duty officers, and once again Vosh's friends were the duty officers, and once again the assignments were not kind. They put Mara in a squad with Vosh. I saw the roster the night before the drop. I went to Seven with it. I said this is going to get someone killed. You know what he is. You know what he'll do to her out there where the drones can't see everything. And Seven looked at the roster a long time, and then he said something I've never forgotten. He said, if she's what I think she is, this is exactly the trial she needs. And if she's not, better we learn it now than in a real war. I hated that answer. I hated it because it was cold, and I hated it more because it was right. They dropped us, them, onto the planet at the start of the dark season, when the dead world turns away from its star, and the temperature falls past what most species can stand. The drop pods scattered the squads across the quadrant, and then the watching began. The first days, Mara's squad held together barely. There were 6 of them: Mara, Vosh, 2 other Kask who deferred to Vosh, a Threx named Gurok who was decent enough but slow, and a young Maul who'd been sick before the drop and got sicker fast in the cold. Vosh was squad leader. The duty officer had made sure of that, and Vosh ran the squad the way you'd expect for the strong by the strong. The Maul was slowing them down, so Vosh wanted to leave it. The Threx was eating too much of the shared rations, so Vosh wanted to cut his share. Every decision Vosh made, he made to shed the weak and preserve the strong, because that's the only logic a Kask knows. Mara fought him on all of it, quietly the way she did everything. She didn't challenge his command, she was too smart for that, knew it would just trigger his pride and make everything worse. Instead, she'd do the thing he refused to do herself on her own back. He won't carry the sick Maul, she'd carry it. He cuts the Threx's rations, she'd give the Threx her own. He wants to march through the night and leave the slow ones behind. She'd hang back and march with the slow ones, and somehow, every dawn, the whole squad would still be together, because she'd refused again and again to let it come apart. The drones caught all of it. We watched it from the station, in the dark observation room, cycle after cycle. I remember the staff getting quiet during the playback, even the Kask instructors, because what we were watching wasn't strength, not the kind we measured. It was something we didn't have a word for, and it was holding a squad together by sheer refusal while the strongest member of that squad tried his best to tear it apart. Then the storm came. The dead world has storms. Not water, there's no water left down there. Dust storms. Ash storms. The wind picks up the burned remains of a whole dead planet and throws it across the quadrant at speeds that strip equipment and bury everything else. The Academy seeds the trials during the calm season usually, but that cycle they'd misjudged, or maybe they hadn't, maybe they wanted to see, and a storm rolled in on the 4th day that was worse than anything the records had. We lost drone contact with most of the quadrant. The whole observation room went tense. You don't lose drone contact at the Academy. The whole point is that we see everything. And suddenly we saw nothing, just gray static where 6 squads of recruits were fighting to stay alive, and we had no way to reach them and no way to pull them out until the storm passed. It lasted 2 days. 2 days blind, with 300 recruits down there in the worst storm the dead world had thrown in a generation. The instructors didn't sleep. I didn't sleep. We sat in that dark room watching static and waiting, and telling ourselves that the trial was the trial, that this was what they'd signed up for, that some of them dying was the price of finding out who could live. I thought about Mara. I thought about her in that storm with Vosh, who hated her in the dark where no drone could see, where a knife between the ribs would just be one more body the storm buried. I thought Vosh would do it. I was almost sure he would. It was the perfect chance, and he was the kind of creature who took perfect chances. When the storm broke on the 3rd morning and the drones came back online, the whole room leaned forward at once. What we saw, I'll tell you in the second part, because it changed everything. It changed the Academy. It changed what the whole coalition thought a human was, and it came down in the end to 3 words, 3 small human words that Mara said in the worst moment, words so simple a child could understand them, words that broke a Kask's whole world and built something new in the rubble. but you'll have to wait for them. The way we waited in that dark room for the static to clear. When the storm broke and the drones came back, the first squad we found was on a ridge in the eastern quadrant. 3 recruits, huddled, 2 dead. We logged it and moved on because that's what you do, and I felt something cold settle in my stomach that had nothing to do with the air on the deck. The second squad we found had scattered. We never recovered 2 of them. The dead world keeps what it takes. I was watching the screens with both hands flat on the console, leaning in, and I heard myself say her name under my breath. Just once. Mara. Sethan heard it. He didn't say anything. He just reached over and switched the main display to the western quadrant where her squad had last been before the storm took our eyes. For a long moment there was nothing. Gray. Ash settling out of the air in slow sheets. The drone drifted over a landscape that looked like the surface of a burned-out star, and I thought they're gone, all 6 of them. The storm took them and we'll log it and move on the way we always do. And then we saw the shelter. It shouldn't have existed, that's the first thing. There's no natural shelter in the western quadrant, it's flat open, the worst place to be caught in a storm. But somebody had built one. Dug down into the ash and the dead soil, walled it with drop pod plating and scavenged stone, roofed it with the squad's combined thermal sheets lashed down against the wind. It was crude. It was ugly. It was, I realized as the drone circled lower, an almost perfect piece of survival engineering. The kind of thing you'd only build if you understood exactly how bad the storm was going to be and exactly how long it would last. And it was intact. The storm that had scattered squads and killed recruits across the whole quadrant had broken on this one ugly little shelter and not gotten in. The drone found the heat signatures, 6 of them, 6, all alive. I won't pretend I didn't make a sound. I did. I'm not ashamed of it. Half the observation room made a sound. We pulled the recorded footage. The shelter had survived, but our eyes had been blind through the storm, so we only had the drone's external view at first. But the squads carry their own recorders, hardened, local. It took a few hours to retrieve and sync the data. And when we played it back, the whole room watched in silence, and nobody moved, and nobody spoke, because we were watching something none of us had words for. Let me tell you what was on that recording. The storm hit on the 4th day, fast, faster than any of them expected. Vosh's instinct, and you have to give him this, it wasn't a coward's instinct, it was a cask's, was to run. To outpace the storm, push hard, leave behind whoever couldn't keep up. The sick Maul couldn't keep up. The Threx was slow. In Vosh's logic, the squad's best chance was to abandon the weak and run, and the strong would live, and that was the natural order and the right thing. Mara said no. She didn't say it loud. The recording caught it. She just stopped in the rising wind with the ash already starting to fly, and she said no, we don't run, we can't outrun it, look at it, we'll be caught in the open and die one at a time. We dig in. We build. We survive it together or we don't survive it. Vosh turned on her. This was it. This was the moment I dreaded, out there where the drones couldn't see, except the local recorder saw everything. He turned on her with his blades half out and the storm screaming behind him, and he told her she was a weak, soft human who would get them all killed with her weakness, that the only law out here was strength, that the sick and the slow were already dead and clinging to corpses would just make more corpses. And Mara, small, exhausted, half frozen, facing the deadliest recruit in the academy in the middle of a killing storm, Mara walked up to him, closed the distance herself, put herself right in front of his blades, and she looked up at him with that weather-watching calm, the calm that had haunted him since the sparring hall, and the recorder caught every word. She said, "Then kill me, right now, because I'm not leaving them and I'm not going to stop, and the only way you get me to abandon those 2 is to put a blade in me and step over my body. So do it or help me dig." The wind howled. Vosh stood there with his blades out and the storm at his back and the whole world ending around them. And he didn't kill her. I've thought about that moment more than almost any other in my life. Why didn't he? He could have. It would have been easy and clean, and the storm would have hidden it. By every law he believed in, he should have. She was weak. She was an insult. She was offering him her own throat. But that was exactly it. She was offering him her throat, and she wasn't afraid. He'd spent the whole cycle trying to find her fear, and now she was an inch from his blades and there was still no fear in her. Only that calm, only that absolute refusal, and Vash understood, finally, in that howling dark, that he had been wrong about everything. That what he'd called weakness was a kind of strength he had no name for and no defense against. That this small, soft creature would genuinely rather die than abandon two members of a species that despised her. And that meant she was not weak. It meant she was something he had never encountered and could not break. He put his blades away, and he picked up a shovel, and they dug. For 2 days, they held that shelter against the storm. The recording is hard to watch. It's dark mostly, they killed the lights to save power. You hear more than you see. You hear the wind, constant, a scream that never stops. You hear the Maul's breathing get worse, wet and ragged through its helmet. You hear them rationing the heat, the food, the water, 6 of them packed into a hole in a dead world while the planet tried to bury them. And you hear Mara, not leading exactly. She never gave an order the whole 2 days, but you hear her holding them together the way she'd held the whole squad together since the drop, by refusing, again and again, to let anyone be lost. When the Maul's breathing failed, she was the one who cleared its filters with her own hands in the dark, her fingers freezing, doing it by feel. When the Threx started to despair, and a despairing Threx is a dangerous thing, big and frightened in a small space, she talked him down, low and steady, until his breathing slowed. When the 2 lesser cask wanted to gamble on a run for it, she talked them out of it, not by command but by simple arithmetic. This many hours of storm left, this much shelter. This is how we live, that is how we die, choose. And Vash, this is the part that undid me, Vash helped her. Somewhere in those 2 dark days, the proudest creature in the academy started doing what the human girl did. Not because she ordered him to. She never ordered him to anything. But because he'd watched her and something in him had broken open, and through the break came something new. There's a moment on the recording near the end of the 2nd day when the Maul stops breathing. Just stops. And in the dark you hear Mara start the resuscitation, the humankind, the kind that shouldn't even work on a Maul, and you hear her getting tired, her own strength almost gone and her voice cracking as she counts. And then you hear another set of hands join hers. Bigger hands. Cask hands. Vash, taking over the compressions when she couldn't do them anymore, keeping the rhythm she'd set, while she breathed for the thing that both their species considered beneath them. They brought it back. The Maul lived, all 6 lived. And right there in the dark, with the storm finally starting to fade, you hear Vash ask her something. His voice is different than I'd ever heard it, stripped down, the pride gone out of it. He asks her, and I'm giving you the translation, the recorder caught it in trade tongue. He asks her why. Why she wouldn't leave them. Why she'd rather have died. Why, when he'd given her every chance to save herself, she kept choosing the hardest possible path. He asks it like a creature who genuinely cannot understand. Because in his whole life, in his whole species' history, nobody had ever made the choice she made. And Mara, exhausted, frozen, her hands raw, having just dragged a dying creature back into the world, Mara answers him. 3 words. I want to slow down here, because when I tell people this story, this is the part where they expect something grand, some speech, some thunderous human philosophy about glory or destiny or the indomitable spirit. That's what the cask expected too, I think. That's what we all expected, watching it in that dark room on the station. We leaned in for the great human secret, the thing that made them unbreakable. It wasn't grand. That's what made it land the way it did. She looked at Vash. You can see it on the recording, the lights just coming back up as the storm died. The 2 of them filthy and frozen and barely alive over the body of the creature they'd saved. And she said, very simply, like it was the most obvious thing in the world, like she couldn't understand why he'd even ask. Nobody gets left. That was it, 3 words. Nobody gets left. No qualifier. No the strong or the worthy or our own kind. Nobody. Not the sick Mall whose species spat on her. Not the slow Threx who ate too much. Not the lesser cask who'd have abandoned her in a heartbeat. Not even Vash, who'd spent a whole cycle trying to break her and had pulled a blade on her in a storm. Nobody gets left. It applied to all of them, without exception, including the ones who didn't deserve it, including the one who tried to kill her. And she said it like it was simple arithmetic, like it was the only possible way to do the math of being alive among others. The observation room was silent. Sethan, the old one, had his eyes closed. And Vash, on the recording, you watch it happen, Vash, who had built his entire self on the law that the weak get left, that the weak should get left, that leaving the weak is the whole order of the universe, sat there in the dying storm and heard 3 words that took that law and turned it inside out. You could see the exact moment it broke him. And you could see, right after, the exact moment something new started to grow in the space where it had been. They were extracted the next morning. All 6. The only squad in the western quadrant to come through the storm without a single loss. When the transport came down and the ramp dropped, the recovery team found them sitting together in the wreckage of their ugly little shelter, packed close for warmth, the Mall alive and breathing in the middle of them, and they came out in a single line, the way the humans had come down the ramp at the start of the cycle. But this time it wasn't 12 humans. It was a Threx and 2 lesser cask and a Mall and a human and Vash, all of them moving together, all of them watching out for the slow ones, all of them refusing now to let anyone fall behind. Vash came off that planet a different creature. I don't have a better way to say it. The recruit who'd gone down was the proudest, cruelest, most gifted killer in the academy, and the one who came back up was quieter and steadier, and when the duty officer, his own friend, the one who'd rigged the squads to break the humans, when that officer made a joke about the human girl, Vash told him to be silent in a voice that ended the conversation, and several others like it for the rest of the cycle. He never apologized to her. Cask don't, not really. Their language barely has the shape for it. But he did something that meant more coming from him. At the next mixed species sparring, when the duty officer tried to match Mara against someone overmatched again, Vash stepped in and took the match himself, and he and Mara sparred, and it was a real match, 2 people who'd survived something together testing each other clean. He lost again. He didn't mind. You could tell he didn't mind. Something had gotten bigger than winning. And the strangest thing, the thing I still turn over in my mind, is what happened to the rest of the class after the story got out. Because it got out. These things always do. The recording leaked, the way everything at the academy eventually leaks, and within a few cycles every recruit from 40 species had heard the 3 words and seen what they'd done to the deadliest cask any of us had ever trained. Nobody gets left. It spread like the dust spreads. You'd hear it in the corridors. You'd hear a Threx say it to a struggling Mall on the endurance march. You'd hear it pass between species that had hated each other for 10,000 cycles. It became a thing recruits said to each other when the trial got bad, when someone was about to fall, when the easy thing was to push ahead and leave the weak behind. 3 human words, and they rewrote something in the bones of that place that all our laws and traditions had never managed to touch. I asked Sethan about it once, near the end of that cycle, the old one. I asked him what it was really that the humans had, the thing we'd been trying to name since the first endurance march. He was quiet a long while, then he said something I've carried ever since. He said, "We always thought strength was the thing that wins. The whole galaxy is built on it. Strongest species rules, strongest recruit leads, the weak get left because the weak are a liability. And then 12 soft little things flew in on a patched-up ship and showed us we'd had it backward the whole time. It was never strength that held a squad together in a storm. It was the refusal to let go. And that's not a thing of the body. The body has limits, every body, even theirs. That's a thing of the will. And their will, Corval, their will doesn't have a limit I've ever found. They feel everything, they break in every way a body can break, and they will not let go. and I have trained 40 species, and I have never seen anything like it, and I don't think I ever will again." He looked out the viewport, at the dead gray world below, the one that had burned in some old war over some old strength. "The galaxy's been ruled by the strong for a long time," he said. "I think that's about to change. And I think it's going to change because of 3 words a frozen girl said in a hole in the ground to the cruelest creature I ever taught. That was a long time ago now. Things did change. Not overnight, nothing changes overnight, and there was a great deal of pain still to come. Wars and betrayals and losses I won't put in this telling. But it changed. The coalition is a different thing now than it was, and if you trace it back far enough, past all the treaties and the battles and the great names in the histories, you come to a war school over a dead world and a storm, and a recording of a girl with raw hands saying 3 words in the dark. Mara graduated top of that cycle, not because she was the strongest, she never was, not by any measure we'd had before her. They had to invent new measures. She rose far after that. You'd know the name if I told you the rest of it. Most of the galaxy knows the name now. But the part most people don't know, the part I was there for, is that it didn't start with greatness. It started with a small soft thing that refused to let go of a creature that didn't deserve it, in the worst moment, for no reward at all. Vosh served beside her for the rest of his life. Did you know that? The cask who hated her became the one who stood at her shoulder for 40 cycles and more, and when she fell at last, and she did fall, eventually, the way the brave ones always seem to, he was the one who carried her body out, because nobody, he said, gets left. I'm old now, older than Sethen was that cycle. My skin's gone white and the young instructors think I tell too many stories. Maybe I do, but this is the one that matters, so I tell it whenever someone will sit still long enough to hear it. The Academy's toughest challenged a human girl. He had every advantage, strength, speed, blades, pride, the whole weight of a galaxy that agreed with him about what mattered. And she beat him. Not with any of the things he had. She beat him with 3 words, and the worst part for him, the part that broke him open and built him new, was that she wasn't even trying to beat him. She was just telling him the truth as she knew it, the simplest truth there is, the one her whole strange, stubborn species seems to be born already knowing. Nobody gets left. If you remember nothing else from this old gray fool's story, remember that.